Welcome back to More Than Words, episode 9, where agricultural improvement turns out to be 18th century code for pack your bags and don't come back. This week features a castle so ludicrously lavish it makes Versailles look restrained, the last woman burned for witchcraft in Scotland, allegedly for turning her daughter into a pony, and a nature reserve that doubles as an RAF bombing range. Expect Jurassic coal, giraffe height whisky stills, and the kind of historical reckoning that doesn't pair well with shortbread in the gift shop. All narrated by someone who pulled a hamstring while weeding and is now limping through Cyprus in 30-degree heat, wondering if retirement was supposed to involve this much controlled dehydration. Stage 9. Tainspotting. Right then, time for the scoreboard, because even the most scenic journeys deserve a set of numbers. We're now at 499.5 kilometres, which is just over 17% of the full 2,884 kilometre odyssey, which is far enough to make your Apple Watch file for workplace compensation and your shoelaces to demand hazard pay. Time taken in real life was from the 21st to the 28th of August 2025, so 7 days of steady progress. With drizzle so persistent, it should really be listed as a co-podcaster. Current position is 4.5 days ahead of schedule, which means I'm walking so fast I could stop for a fry-up, a pint and still arrive before myself. IRL. Crouching gardener, hidden hamstring. This week unfolded like one of those classic highs and lows montages that would make a sports psychologist weep into their ethically sourced oat milk. It began with what can only be described as the best round of golf I've ever played in my life. I led a major club competition after round 1, feeling every bit the heroic amateur. Birds sang, playing partners nodded appreciatively, and I briefly considered sending a press release to Sky Sports. Then came round 2, and with it the golf gods, who clearly have a sense of humour and access to my handicap record, and their decision to restore balance to the universe. I played like a man who'd accidentally picked up a croquet mallet. Fairways were ignored like bad advice at a party, and putts slid past the hole with all the grace of a drunken penguin on roller skates. I went from leaderboard hero to cautionary tale in 18 holes. The only thing I led by the end was the walk of shame back to the car park. I followed this sporting roller coaster with a stint of gardening for my parents, which is my polite way of saying I spent a couple of hours pushing a mower, wielding a strimmer like Leatherface, and launching a full-scale assault on the weeds behind their shed. It should have been the kind of gentle pottering that retirement brochures depict, with soft-focused serenity and pastel cardigans. Instead, I ended up with a hamstring injury, because apparently crouching is now a high-risk activity and weeding qualifies as an extreme sport. The final stretch of Stage 9 coincided with our arrival in Paphos, Cyprus, where the Mediterranean has been busy demonstrating that 30-degree heat and walking are one of those combinations that sound idyllic in theory but prove challenging in practice. The coastal path did offer stunning views and blue waters, assuming you could see them through the sweat cascading down your forehead like a salty waterfall. The medieval castle at Paphos Harbour was a highlight, though walking its ramparts in temperatures that would make Zeus complain, while nursing a hamstring that was clearly filing formal grievances, provided the kind of cultural experience that builds character, assuming character can be built through controlled dehydration and creative limping. But now we hobble back into the digital realm, where the skies are reliably grey, the temperature hovers around a forgiving 10 degrees, and the only thing likely to overheat is your Wi-Fi router. Virtual Insanity Stage 9. Lothmore to Calrossie. This stretch of our virtual journey traces the Sutherland coastline from Lothmore to Calrossie. A journey that doubles as a crash course in how to erect grand monuments to wealth, while quietly evicting the people who made that wealth possible. If that sounds a bit heavy, that's because it is. Apologies for the mood dip, but the clearances don't exactly lend themselves to light banter. Along the way, we'll meet the last woman burned for witchcraft in Scotland, a castle so over the top it makes Versailles look like my parents' garden shed, the most northerly coal mine in Britain, and enough clearance villages to make you extremely worried if you ever hear the words agricultural improvement. So pack your moral compass and a healthy scepticism of anything described as being done for the greater good. How will you like me now? Our journey kicks off at Lothmore, Gaelic for Big Marsh, a refreshingly honest place name when property developers today would probably have called it something like Aquatic Heritage Meadows. The parish of Loth is the smallest of Sutherland's 14, and seems to have borrowed its name from the farm where the church stands, now called Lothmoor, presumably to distinguish it from the neighbouring Lothbeg. Lothbeg, predictably, means Little Marsh, because when you've committed to a naming convention involving wetlands, it's probably best to stick with it. Passing through Lothbeg, we find the Wolf Stone, a standing stone that presumably commemorates either an ancient wolf encounter or someone's particularly traumatic run-in with a Highland Terrier. Archaeological evidence suggests this area has been continuously occupied since the Bronze Age, which means that people have been braving Sutherland's weather for roughly 3,000 years, a testament either to extraordinary resilience or a chronic inability to afford relocation to the Costa del Sol. Brock Solid. Further down the coast, Kintradwell is no less archaeologically ambitious. It boasts the Kintroller Brock, a 2,000-year-old stone tower built to Iron Age standards that would put modern developers to shame. When excavated in the latter half of the 19th century, its entrance passage was found to be a lofty 2.1 metres high, a stark contrast to the low, narrow entrances common to most brocks. Inside, a rock-cut well plunges over 2 metres deep, complete with steps leading down, proof that even prehistoric architects couldn't resist a water feature. Next comes Ackrimsdale, which sounds suspiciously like a prescription drug advertised at 2 AM on American television. Ask your doctor if Ackrimsdale is right for you. Side effects may include sheep, midges, and an uncontrollable urge to pronounce lock correctly. Brora Explorer. Heading further south, we stride into Brora, the industrial crown jewel of this coastal stretch, a village that somehow crammed more commercial ventures into a single postcode than most small cities. Over the years, Brora played host to a coal pit, boat building, salt pans, fish curing, a lemonade factory, the Clynelish distillery, a wool mill, brickworks and a stone quarry. Essentially Scotland's answer to a diversified investment portfolio, albeit one with considerably more manual labour and fewer golf course lunches with your financial advisor. Its coal mine was once the most northerly in Scotland, and among the earliest, with operations kicking off in the early 16th century. But this wasn't your garden variety coal. Brora's was Jurassic in age, not Carboniferous, meaning locals were essentially burning younger dinosaur-era fossils to heat their homes. So while the rest of Scotland was stoking fires with ancient forests, Brora was casually tossing velociraptors on the hearth like it was just another Tuesday. Dunrobin. Moving through Dol, things get a little tricky for sat-navs. Say it out loud 10 years ago and your car might think you're hunting for the nearest Toys R Us. Say it now and there's a chance it'll reroute you somewhere less child-friendly. Somewhere with mood lighting, discreet packaging and a loyalty scheme you probably don't want to explain to your gran. Just beyond Dol we arrive at Dunrobin Castle, seat of the Dukes and Earls of Sutherland, and quite possibly the most ostentatiously French thing north of Calais. Dunrobin is what happens when a French chateau and a Scottish hunting lodge have a very expensive baby, then send it to finishing school and have Versailles and Balmoral as godparents. With 189 rooms, manicured gardens, and a falconry display that feels like a deleted scene from Downton Abbey, it's the kind of place that, from a distance, could easily be mistaken for a Disney animatronic, albeit one with a strong opinion on land reform. But beneath the turrets and topiary lies a complicated legacy. This was the power base of the Sutherland family, whose approach to estate management helped usher in the Highland clearances and left behind places like Badby. Magnificent though it looks, you can't forget that this grandeur was in part funded by human displacement and burning out tenant farmers. Today the castle is open to the public, and the gift shop sells its trinkets and shortbread with a generous helping of historical amnesia. PR and Prejudice. Golspie lies in the long shadow of Dunrobin Castle, and above it looms Ben Bragi, crowned by a monument to the first Duke of Sutherland that locals have been debating since the day it went up. Occasionally they've tried to blow it up. Results? Mixed. Just down the road in Culmaley, the echoes of the Highland clearances still rattle. Patrick Seller, lawyer, land agent and all-round eviction enthusiast, ended up crofting here after his infamous tenure with the Sutherlands. That stint concluded with charges of arson and culpable homicide. He was acquitted, technically, but remained a lightning rod for fury and grief. The Sutherlands, meanwhile, distanced themselves with impressive speed, dropping Seller like a hot tatty the moment the legal heat turned up. It's a very familiar playbook. Get the job done, look the other way, and when the public catches on, it's all not our policy and we don't recognise that version of events. Cue the sound of distant hoofbeats as the PR cavalry rides in. Mound as a pound. Through Kirkton we reached the Mound, a name that could easily belong to an Iron Age burial site or a particularly uninspired housing development, but was in fact a railway station, and the spot where Thomas Telford's causeway muscles its way across the mouth of the Dornoch Firth. Telford, never one to let geography dictate, well, anything really, simply built a 1,000-yard embankment across the estuary because going around things was apparently for quitters. The whole thing cost £9,749 in 1817, roughly 923 grand today. I know this because I asked ChatGPT, which not only gave me the answer, but also the Python code it used to calculate it. Show off. Blink and you'll miss Acavandra Muir. No surprise really, since the name translates from Gaelic as Andrew's Field. At this rate, we're surely only a few miles away from discovering Alison's Allotment, Ben's Back Garden and Colin's Croft, the Highland housing estate of your dreams, now with added bracken. Next up is Evelix, named either for the river it sits on or vice versa. I'd check, but honestly life's too short. Then comes Clashmore, which sounds like a rejected iPhone game where children spend $19.99 unlocking digital reward chests filled with disappointment and pixelated regret. It's followed by Cuthill, less a place, more a minor topographical inconvenience that Thomas Telford would have flattened without blinking if a slightly raised patch of turf dared to interrupt his latest engineering flex. Bridge over troubled daughters. We plough through these stretches, carried onward to our next feat of Highland infrastructure, the Dornoch Firth Bridge. Opened in August 1991 by the Queen Mother, it flings the A9 across the Firth like a magic trick. No more 30-mile detours via Bonar Bridge. At just under 900 metres and stitched together with 21 spans, it seems to say, yes, we love our scenery, but let's not let it win every round of geographical chess. We've technically skirted past Dornoch on our southward trot down the A9, but it deserves a quick nod before we cross the Firth. For one, I've been, and I'd heartily recommend it. We stayed at the Dunrobin Castle Hotel, and my only regret is not playing golf on the adjacent course. That course, by the way, is Royal Dornoch, ranked second best in the world by Golf Digest, and routinely hailed as one of the finest links experiences on the planet. I assume it's the kind of place where even your worst round feels like a privilege. Despite this massive golfing faux pas, at least the whisky selection in the bar was tremendous, with some even falling into the affordable category. Once again, 10 out of 10 would recommend. For two, Dornoch bears the grim honour of hosting Scotland's last legal witch execution. Janet Horne was burned at the stake in 1727, making her the final person in the British Isles to be officially dispatched for witchcraft. Her alleged crimes? Chief among them the rather niche accusation of turning her daughter into a pony and riding her to meetings with the devil. Even by witch trial standards, that feels like a stretch. I mean, if you were a witch, surely you'd conjure something more dignified than your own offspring disguised as a small horse. A carriage perhaps, or at the very least a broom with lumbar support. The trial itself may not have been entirely legal, and today a modest stone in Dornoch marks the site of her execution. A quiet monument to what happens when superstition collides with judicial improvisation. Or perhaps with more relevance today, when stupidity meets appeasement. I'll stop there before I veer into full rant mode and start drafting policy recommendations. Call of Duty Highlands Edition. After crossing the bridge we roll into Tain, which proudly bills itself as the oldest official designated royal borough in the Highlands. And fair play. It got its royal charter from King Malcolm III in 1066, the same year Harold took an arrow to the eye and Billy the Conk rewrote English history with a sword and a strong sense of entitlement. These days, Tain is best known for its Glenmorangie whisky, distilled just outside town and famed for its giraffe-height copper stills, hence the distillery mascot, which is either charming or deeply confusing depending on how many tastings you've had. But Tain also boasts ecclesiastical clout. St Duthac's Chapel sits quietly in the town centre, once a pilgrimage site for medieval royalty. James IV allegedly visited 11 times, which suggests even kings knew how to combine piety with a decent single malt. Just beyond Tain lies one of the more unexpected features on our route, the Tain Air Weapons Range, where the RAF practices dropping things on other things with varying degrees of precision. You can't really miss it, not because it's signposted on the A9 with next left for explosions, but because the RAF has a habit of announcing its presence with sonic enthusiasm. Established in 1930 and still the UK's largest live weapons range, it sprawls across 3,000 acres of tidal bog and salt marsh that transforms twice a day from bird sanctuary into a Top Gun reboot. Few places sum up modern Britain quite like this, a nature reserve that moonlights as a multiplayer map from Call of Duty. You only get a boom with Typhoon. Our final stretch for this stage takes in Knockbreck, Aldie and Calrossie, the sort of places that would easily pass as quiet Highland villages if it weren't for the sonic booms and helicopters loitering overhead like nosy neighbours with night vision. And just to clarify, Aldie is not the temple of Central Chaos where you go in for milk and come out with a chainsaw. Think less retail madness and more watermills, gentle burns and what look like exceedingly pleasant forest walks. This marks the end of a stage that's taken us from prehistoric settlements to medieval castles, through industrial grit and into the realm of modern military hardware. Only in Scotland could ancient circles share a postcode with weapons testing ranges, and the same families who once cleared tenant farmers now charge admission to their ancestral estates. Generations in Sutherland have left their mark. Whether that meant stacking stones into towers, mining coal, distilling whisky, or deploying explosives in either an official, RAF, or unofficial, statue defacing capacity. That's it for Stage 9. See you further down the A9, where the history is just as layered and the sheep just as unimpressed. Until then, keep walking, mind your moral compass, and if you're planning to turn someone into a pony, maybe just get an Uber instead. This has been More Than Words. Thanks for listening.